The story of Black America is the story of America. It's the story of a people who have pushed this country to live up to its stated ideals. But Black people have always believed in the promise of a better America. So, at this moment we're in now, we must choose to fight for that better America. And just like our ancestors who stood up to the violent racists of a generation ago, we will stand up to this president and say, no more. Because America is better than him. So we choose to be bigger. We choose to be bolder. We choose to bring back justice, respect, and dignity to this country. We choose Joe Biden to lead us all towards that American promise together.
Join Milwaukee Film virtually for the Minority Health Film Festival, presented by the Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin Health Network, taking place September 10th through 24th. Watch 50 films plus conversations about the health and well-being of families, communities, and institutions. Festival passes are on sale now at mkefilm.org/MHFF. The Forum, exclusively on Facebook Live, Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, covering topics from local, national, and everything in between. It may not be what you expect to hear, but we will definitely give you what you need to know. That's The Forum, exclusively on Facebook Live. Call in 414-395-0484. There's liberal news, there's conservative news, and then there's the truth. Join us for the truth. Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Thursday, September 3rd, 2020. Well, you guys got your wish. I know a bunch of people wanted Joe Biden to visit Wisconsin because apparently just by coming to Wisconsin, that increases the likelihood that someone is going to vote for Joe Biden. So he is coming to Kenosha. It's not a big campaign event. It's not a big rally. He is doing what Donald Trump should have done, meeting with the Blake family. Let me take that back. No, Donald Trump should not have met with the Blake family because it would go counter and contrary to Donald Trump's campaign strategy and his themes. You can't meet with the Black family that had a member of their family injured by the police because Donald Trump is pro-police in just about every scenario. So Trump couldn't do that, leaving this gaping hole of opportunity for Joe Biden. And Joe Biden had to do it. He had to. So first of all, Trump coming to Wisconsin was just to best Joe Biden in that Biden had not yet been here. And a lot of people here on the ground in Wisconsin have been calling for Biden to come because we have these nightmares of 2016 when Hillary Clinton ignored Wisconsin. So you had that demand for Biden to be here. But then you have this opportunity in which Biden can show his contrasts to Donald Trump, and that visit is going to be taking place today. A couple of things that I want to talk about today. Of course, good morning, everybody. Camille Mays, Diane Blaylock, Susie Roundy Schmitz. Good morning. She says, love the backgrounds. Do you like those? I kind of, other than some random connectivity issues I have, because I think I've exceeded my capacity to broadcast from my house. Like if I start adding additional broadcast features, then it's just going to go haywire. But yeah, I can, I found a picture of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and I made that as my background, and I played the commercial because it looks professional. I don't know. Francine Hale, good morning to you as well. Joe Biden raised a lot of money. I want to talk about that. He raised an insane amount of money in the month of August because the concern has always been, well, Donald Trump is going to raise more money. Don't let that be a concern anymore. Joe Biden raised $365 million in the month of August. Let me give you some perspective. Barack Obama's best month ever, 170 million ever. Barack Obama raised a lot of money, raised more money than Mitt Romney and McCain and Palin. Joe Biden has raised $365 million in a single month. The whole campaign of 2012, or at the time, the 2012 election of Barack Obama was the most expensive campaign in history. And Barack Obama raised $875 million for the whole campaign, the whole thing, from the Ruta to the Tuta. Ruta being beginning, Tuta being the end. Joe Biden raised half of Barack Obama's total campaign haul in a month. So we're going to talk about that. It also shows some strength and viability of the ticket. Now, the question is the Biden campaign going to know how to spend that money effectively and efficiently? That remains to be seen. But before we get into other stuff, good morning, Sahara Ali, and anyone else I may have missed. So you saw the letter. Can we talk about the letter from the Wauwatosa letter that you saw? And I posted it and you posted it and people talked about it. And it was signed by Toby Woke. Did you see that letter? The response to the letter, anyone who saw it, pretty predictable. And then, you'll go and talk about the history of Wauwatosa, and they were a suburb created by housing covenant where no brown people other than domestic servants could take up any kind of residence in the suburb of Wauwatosa. And some people went through all of that history. Here's where we are in today's politics, or just our society in general. The issue of race has taken precedent over probably anything else. And I would say, so first of all, finally, and then rightfully so, we've always been, at least Black people have been, hypersensitive to the issue of race because it unfortunately can define your circumstances. It can define your opportunity. It can define where you live. It can define your health disparities. I mean, it can define whether you get high blood pressure, diabetes, or both. Race is such a defining factor. And let's be clear about this, not because of Black people. Black people have never really had the opportunity, or African Americans, of those who are descended from slaves in America, have never had an opportunity, an unmolested opportunity to define ourselves. We are always on defense in response to what others think we are, right? So we've never been able to define ourselves. So being Black is like this construct of people that wanted to have a race and a culture, a cohort of people that could always be marginalized. So there's that. And because we are so incredibly sensitive to the issue of race, a letter like this that circulates using the language that they're using just makes a lot of sense, right? We're in Trump's America. This is the kind of thing you would see in Trump's America. The letter is fake, guys. And I know that we want to use it as a glowing example of how much racism there is. And what's amazing, or maybe not amazing, I'm still shocked every day, right? When I think I can't be shocked anymore, some things still shock me. So there are people who have been paying attention, or so they say, to everything that's been going on from from protests to fires that have burned to property that has been destroyed to Black men and Black women and Black children who have lost their lives to vigilantes or law enforcement. And it was that letter on Wauwatosa that finally got some white folks to say, like, oh my gosh, there really is a problem. Oh my gosh, maybe there is a racial problem. I think the letter was a total false flag because someone who, first of all, the clues that are in the letter, like who spells morals like the mushroom? It's signed Toby Woke. If we can't see that we are being trolled by that letter, then our hypersensitivity to race right now is going to be we're going to be manipulated by it. Right? So I can recall a couple of instances where there was a noose found. I think it was the one at Marquette University here in Milwaukee. There was a noose found on the door of a dorm room door. It's a Black girl and a white girl that shared a dorm room. And the Black girl just didn't like the white girl. She just didn't like her. It's not that the white girl was racist. They didn't get along. Sometimes when you take strangers from two different parts of the country and you ask them to room together in college, sometimes people don't get along. It happens. In fact, it's pretty common. So what the Black girl did is she hung a noose either in the dorm room or on the handle of their door and blamed her white roommate because the Black girl just wanted that roommate out of the room. She wanted her to get kicked out of the room or kicked out of the university. And because we are so hypersensitive to those symbols and those images, we immediately think that this was an act of racism. And I'm going to be honest with you, 99.9% of the time, when you do see a noose or you do see these overt symbols of racism or slavery or something else that marginalizes Black and brown people, they're authentic. But this letter, which no one saw anybody deliver, signed by Toby Woke. In fact, I got a national story here. It made national news. That is how hypersensitive we all are to the issue of race. From Newsweek, anonymous letter urges white Wisconsin residents to, quote, keep Wauwatosa free from Blacks. And it's in response to a series of yard signs that have been printed up by God knows who that are on display in the front yards of a couple of homes in Wauwatosa. Some residents in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin have received a racist letter urging them to keep their city, quote, free from Blacks. And the recipients appear to have something in common beyond where they live, a yard sign. According to WDJT TV, recipients of the letter have a yard sign in front of their homes, which readers, quote, for sale unless, which reads, I got a spelling error in the damn national publication, quote, for sale unless politicians keep Tosa safe, paid for by Tosa taxpayers fed up with mayor and city council. The signs are meant to criticize Wauwatosa Mayor Dennis McBride for his response to ongoing protests in the city following the police shooting of Alvin Cole, a 17-year-old from Milwaukee. Many protesters have called for the firing of the officer who fatally shot Cole. Additionally, according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Wauwatosa police officers have stated that they have no confidence in McBride's leadership. Oh, who cares about that? As the protests in Wauwatosa have continued, I believe there was a protest in Wauwatosa last night, which would have marked, I believe, the 100th day of protests in and around the Milwaukee area, if not the 100th day of protests in the nation. And one of the themes of the protests, and we posted the video in the Forum Facebook group, was the letter. The letter was fake. The letter was designed to get the kind of attention that it got, but also to shame the people that are displaying those signs, those yard signs in front of their houses, because it seems like they're pretending or threatening that they're going to sell their houses unless they can be kept safe, maybe from the protests that have been happening all summer. So when you have people that are willing to display that kind of fear of their community, fear of people peacefully protesting, because as I understand it, the vast majority, if not all, of the protests in Wauwatosa have been peaceful. Nothing was burned down in Wauwatosa, except maybe the wood in a white person's fire pit, because the whites love fire pits. But it was designed to troll the people that are displaying those signs. And because of our hypersensitivity to race, no one thought critically about that letter for a second. then maybe they're playing a gigantic joke on us, and then it makes national news. As the protests in Wauwatosa have continued, tensions between the protesters and police have escalated, prompting several arrests, leading McBride to impose a city ordinance prohibiting protests past 8 p.m. local time. I think he since reversed that. The letter, which begins, "Dear white Wauwatosa resident," asks the reader to keep Wauwatosa free from Blacks. "We hope that this letter finds you in good health. We just wanted to touch base. Thank you for purchasing and proudly displaying the yard sign. Your support of our common cause is greatly needed and appreciated." The letter reads, "We whites must stand together. We must keep Wauwatosa free from Blacks and their lack of morals," with morals spelled wrong. That letter would be perfect, written by a white person that is not racist, trying to shame and then bring attention to the negative attitudes of the people that are displaying that yard sign, saying that they don't think that Wauwatosa is safe. Does that make any sense? It's a total false flag. As the letter continues, it states, "We must keep Blacks from destroying our property, raping our wives and our daughters, and recruiting our children into street gangs. We must keep Wauwatosa great." Just those couple of sentences right there are these old, tired, worn out, antiquated stereotypes of why whites have this fear of Black people anyway. So if they're going to display that sign, right, they're going to put on display for everyone walking past or driving past their house that they feel like their community is unsafe because they don't feel protected by the mayor and by the common council, because the mayor of Wauwatosa tried to put in an 8 p.m. curfew, which quickly got overturned because you can't do that. So these people are exhibiting their lack of trust in government to keep them safe from, people marching down the street and chanting fun little protest songs. Quote, "Together we can," it's supposed to be can, but cam, they spelled it wrong, "keep Wauwatosa white." And the spelling errors in the letter is to emulate the ignorance of someone who has these antiquated racial attitudes. And so I didn't really challenge people's commentary on the letter when it was posted all across social media, because immediately no one saw the details in the letter of it being complete satire. Now, their point is well taken, is it not? Because someone who would display that kind of yard sign in probably one of the safest suburbs that are in southeastern Wisconsin in response to protests for Black Lives Matter, that is probably how some of those people actually think. And the letter was reflected of the ignorance of that mindset that some people have. Good morning, Farina Brooks. Udell Harris, good morning to you. Tammy Reed, good morning. Melissa Garvis, good morning, Melissa. "Because the whites love fire pits." They do. My backyard is really small because I have my garage is set sideways. So most of my backyard is garage. And so, when you go and you hang out with your white friends at a fire pit, it's a whole nother outdoor experience, especially because of the Rona, because you can't go to where you used to could go in the summer. So now you just got to have these little small socially distanced gatherings. And, your white friends have fire pits, but I wish I could have a fire pit here, because I would burn down either my house, my garage, my cedar fence, or probably all three, because I don't really have a lot of space for my fire pit. So get you a white friend if you can, because they have fire pits and enough space to start fires. Grant Lubin told, who we got here? While the letter praises the person displaying the sign in their lawn, WDJ-TV reporter Emily Thornton said she spoke with one neighbor who says the signs have nothing to do with race. Grant Lubin told Thornton he received the anonymous letter about a week after he placed the sign in his yard. He reported it to the local police on August 26th. Lubin said that he was, quote, "very shocked by the letter," and added that whoever wrote the letter was trying to imply that we who had these signs up were racist facetiously. So yes, you are racist. And the letter that you got, including the misspelled words in the letter, is reflective of the same kind of ignorance that would lead someone to spend their money to get a yard sign like that printed up and put on display. It's what you get. TV station also reported that the letter was signed by someone named Toby. If you guys don't see the irony, and it's not just Toby. I think the last name, if you read it on the letter, is Toby Woke. Come on, how do we fall for that and think that was a real letter? A real racist letter. Because I think we may need some clarity, because I want us to be like aware of when a real racist letter goes out, as opposed to one that's ironic and sarcastic and facetious. That's what that was. A real racist letter will be any correspondence from the Donald Trump campaign. That's about as racist as you can possibly get. So not this letter with words spelled wrong, signed by Toby Woke. But what made me so a little upset about this is how we were reacting to it. Like nobody thought to put two and two together. And I bet if you just did some real simple investigating and research on the letter, who got the letters? Were they mailed? Were they dropped off? Did they all arrive on the same day? Because you do maybe a search on social media to see if there's anyone in and around the Wauwatosa area, because this letter came from a Wauwatosa resident. And if there's anybody that posted on social media in the days or the weeks prior to the letter going out, right? Somebody probably put something on social media, taking pictures of those yard signs, saying how terrible it was and how despicable it was. Whoever this person is probably left a trail of clues in which it would be easy to find them. Now, what they said in the letter is not illegal. It's annoying. Just like someone who would display that stupid sign in their yard anyway. Because if that's how you truly feel, if you're threatening to move out of Wauwatosa because the common council and the mayor can't keep you safe, why are you telling anybody? Nobody cares. If you really feel unsafe and the protesters are going to come to your house and use your fire pit when you're not home, eat your barbecue and swim in your pool, then just move. But to display the sign means you are ripe for trolling, because you are exposing a vulnerability and an ignorance that you have when it comes to the issue of race. And so the letter that you got is reflective of how dumb it is that you're displaying the sign in the first place. Sahara Ali, you guys are replying to one another. I wish I could see how do I see my comments in real time? Because when you use this Zoom, not that any of you care, when you use Zoom to broadcast on Facebook, Zoom kind of bullies Facebook. It takes, at least how I'm doing it, it's taking precedent over my normal Facebook functionality. And I know that a lot of you have complained that sometimes when I move, the background goes in and out. I can't help that, but I like to display the backgrounds. Denise Jones, good morning. Fire pits are great gathering places during the pandemic. I don't disagree with that one bit. I love a good fire pit. And you know what's even most fun about the fire pit? When you let Sherwin build the fire. I tend to go overboard. Can I tell you guys a story? It's kind of embarrassing, but what are you going to do? I was going to grill. I like to grill because it's this ultimate triumph of man over the unbridled passion of fire and using fire to cook your food. There's something that's very primitive about using fire to cook your food, and you're outside and you're cooking like an old caveman. So I have my charcoal briquettes, and you got to lay the charcoal briquettes out in such a way. And I don't use a charcoal, one of those tubes. You know how the people have those metal tubes and they put the charcoal in a tube with a bunch of newspaper? That's cheating. Don't do that. That's not old school. I arrange my charcoal briquettes in such a fashion, it's like a literal perfect, it's a pyramid. That's how you do it. But you guys, y'all don't understand. So I arrange my charcoal briquettes, and it's a very tedious thing. You got to make sure the charcoal is in a perfect cone-shaped fashion, okay? Have my charcoal laid out, went into the garage where I keep my lighter fluid, my charcoal starter. Oh, snap. I didn't have any. This is a problem because I got the meat out. This is back when I was eating meat, and the meat was ready. The meat wanted to get on the grill real bad, and I had the meat laid out, and it was probably marinating in something, because when you marinate meat, sometimes it helps the flavor, sometimes it doesn't, but the thought of marinating meat makes it better. And so I got my meat marinating, and I got my charcoal briquettes all stacked up perfectly, but I didn't have any lighter fluid. But you know what I did have? Gasoline. I know gasoline is very flammable and probably not recommended to start your charcoal, right? So I just didn't use a lot. But what am I going to do? I'm not going to the store. Can't do that. The worst thing in the world is having to stop whatever it is you're doing, divert your attention from what you're focused on to have to go to the store for something. It's the worst thing ever, and I wasn't going to do it. I'm not going to the store. That's ridiculous. I got gasoline. I didn't use much. I poured just the tiniest bit of gas, not even a lot. I don't know, an ounce, not much. And I let it, because gasoline evaporates quickly. So I just bloop, poured a little gasoline on my perfectly arranged charcoal briquettes. Remember, the meat is waiting for me. Put the gasoline back in the garage. Probably, I don't know, took 30 seconds, let some of the gasoline dissipate. And then I can remember when, you know how you can light a match and flick it at the same time? You can flick a match. I wasn't going to get, because with lighter fluid, you can get real close to the charcoal and light it. But I use gasoline. And remember, I'm being very cautious. And also remember, I don't have a lot of space between my house, my fence, and my garage. And so when I flicked the match, I'm not kidding you when I thought that it looked like it damn near exploded. However, my charcoal got started and the meat was delicious. What do you want from me? Let's go to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Former Vice President Joe Biden will travel to Wisconsin today to meet with a family of Black man who was shot 7 times in the back. They could have said his name in the damn article. To meet with a family of Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times in the back by a Milwaukee Kenosha police officer, which sparked protests that gave way to violence and the deaths of 2 people protesting his shooting. The meeting comes 2 days after Donald Trump toured the destructive aftermath of the shooting and said he backed off calling the mother of Jacob Blake, who is now paralyzed because attorneys got involved. I would have been more upset if Trump said he was going to visit the Blake family, because his only reason for going to Kenosha was to politicize a tragedy. And so Trump meeting with or talking to the Blake family would have just exploited their tragedy and an entire community's pain. And also, I can just imagine the complaints and the mean-spiritedness of people on social media had the Blake family taken a photo op with President Donald Trump. Even if Trump tried his best to be as sincere as possible and he was apologizing, it would have been destructive for that family to meet with Donald Trump. And this is the long-lasting negative effect in our politics. Even having a conversation with a Republican these days is political suicide, because it seems like there is absolutely no room for compromise. It seems like there's just no way that Democrats and Republicans can agree on even sending out a second round of stimulus checks or doing something to prevent people from getting evicted. There is no compromise whatsoever. And so meeting with or talking to a Republican, especially if the only reason why they're meeting and talking and having a phone conversation is around a tragedy that stems from police violence, then it's a zero-sum game. I don't know what it's going to take, what kind of personalities are going to need to come together, because it seems still to me that there are more Democrats in any level of government that are willing and able to meet with Republicans on political compromise. It is the Republicans that don't want to have anything to do with the Democrats. And I explained that some time ago. When you do a poll of Democratic voters and Republican voters, and because they're very different, The political ideologies are very different, but also just their attitudes toward politics is very, very different. The demographics a lot of times are very different as well between the political parties. But when you ask Democratic voters and Republican voters what they want, Democrats will give you a long list of everything. It's health care, it's wages, it's low taxes on the middle class, it's environments, it's marriage equality, it's racial justice, it's social justice, it's police reform. It's an awful lot of things. And the thing about the Democratic tent, all of those issues are just as important as the other. I don't know how far down the line you have to go when you ask Democratic voters what's important to them before you get to the Second Amendment. But if you ask some Republicans, the Second Amendment is going to be up there. Low taxes, no regulation on business. All of those things are going to rank high with the Republicans, right? But then when you ask these voters, what do they want to see? Republican voters give Republican executives and legislators higher marks, not by the policies they pass, not by their political ideals, none of that. It's by just opposing the Democrats. So the Republicans that run for office do better with their voters when they simply have a platform that just opposes the Democrats. So literally, even if the Democrats have an idea that's good for the country, that's good for mitigating the effects of the pandemic, if the Democrats say wear a mask, Republican voters will respond better when Republicans say don't wear one. Democratic voters are saying, and Democratic officials are saying, no, don't go out for Labor Day. Don't, go out and have a barbecue for the 4th of July. Republicans are saying, go out and have a good time. If Democrats are saying, no, we shouldn't open schools yet, it's not safe. Children are going to have a difficult time social distancing. You're putting teachers at risk. You're putting staff at risk. If Democrats are saying that and are focusing on science, then Republicans are on the complete opposite end. No way, open up the schools, get all the kids back to school. And they have taken that ethos to the next level, to where even if Democrats make sense, the Republicans use everything in their power, including a term coined by Kellyanne Conway called alternative facts. They push back on any good idea the Democrats have. And so I don't know what it takes or who it takes or what kind of courage it takes for a Republican to say, you know what? We have just been operating to oppose Democrats. Now we need to get back to actually making policy. Because if that Republican says something like that too soon or too early or during this presidential contest, if they step forward and say, you know what, I want to get back to governing again. We've got a bunch of challenges. We've got a lot of crisis in this country, 180,000 people dead from the coronavirus. Let me work across the aisle with my Democratic colleagues. Trump would blast them on Twitter, and then the Republicans would find someone to run against that Republican that wants to actually work with Democrats. And our politics is going to be frozen there for a while. So you got to think, if Joe Biden wins, and I hope he does, I hope you guys vote, our politics are still going to be frozen. There's not going to be Republicans that are automatically going to say, oh, well, Joe Biden won, let's work with the Democrats that have the majority in the House of Representatives. That's not going to be the case. And then we have a scenario where if Joe Biden becomes president and the Republicans still hang on to their majority in the Senate, and a number of vacancies on different courts, federal courts and the Supreme Court become available, those seats probably are not going to get filled because Mitch McConnell will not want anyone with any kind of liberal interpretation of federal law and the Constitution to get on the court. This thing that Republicans did under the cover of night that gave them and essentially 40% of the American population almost 100% control, especially in states where they have super Republican majorities, but also between the executive branch, the US Senate, and the Supreme Court, Republicans have control. This new hybrid form of hyper-partisan, exceptionally racist type of Republican political philosophy, because they have focused so long on judges. You really control government when you control the courts. The Democrats have always focused on falling in love with people that are running for office, falling in love with legislators, falling in love with people running for Congress, having this deep and meaningful, like this affection for somebody like Bernie Sanders and AOC, just love them, Rashida Tlaib, we love them. We love them so much, and we love their personality, and we love what they represent. And so our romantic infatuation with the personalities of Democratic candidates has gotten in the way of what the Republicans ultimately were trying to do, pack the courts. So even when Democrats get control in legislatures, because sometimes that's likely to happen, Democrats can win popular support. They can win popular votes. And remember, congressional races and US Senate races, there's no electoral college involved. Those are popular vote contests. And we know that Democrats can win the popular vote. Joe Biden is going to win the popular vote because of what turnout is going to be in California and New York and a couple other traditionally blue states, Massachusetts. But whether he wins the electoral college or not remains to be seen. So Democrats do a good job of using the personality and the political platform of the Democratic Party to get a lot of people involved. Because remember, there's something in the Democratic Party for everybody, for weed smokers, for, I don't know, people that want green energy and people that want windmills. I'm sure there's a cohort of Democrats that say we only want windmill power and they always wear Birkenstocks. Like there's room in the Democratic Party for everybody. While the Republicans will tell you in a second, I've heard this my entire life, boy, oh boy, Sherwin, I sure don't like so-and-so, but I'm going to vote for them because of their stance on abortion and because they're going to appoint judges. And to me, that makes no sense. Why would you vote for somebody you don't like? A lot of them don't like Donald Trump, but they like the fact that Donald Trump will get a list of judges, and Trump won't even vet the judges himself. He won't meet with them. He won't do any of that. He just appoints them. So when the Democrats can win popular support and can control legislatures, the Republicans have worked very, very hard at making sure that the courts are packed with conservatives, so Democratic laws that get passed can be undone by conservative courts. It's like the Democrats will put, good morning, Sherwin. I hope you've since purchased an electric starter for the charcoal briquettes. No, that's by lighter fluid, Judy Brown. Democrats will put the best, what we think, the best players on the court, right? Like our best. The Democratic primary, remember when 27 Democrats were running for the Democratic nomination? Remember that? That was ridiculous. I don't even remember most of them, but I remember Andrew Yang and Eric Swalwell. Kamala Harris was one, Bernie Sanders was one. Who are the other ones? That one guy, Cory Booker was one of them. There's a bunch of them. So we try to find the best political athlete that we can. And we have this gauntlet. We have these primaries and these elections. We have Democratic delegates, however the hell that works. And you have a bunch of different state contests and you got a bunch of stuff and they spend a bunch of money and they raise a bunch of money because we want to find the best Democratic political athlete to put on the court. And we have our slate of candidates running for House of Representatives and U.S. Senate. We've got our presidential candidate. We have our up and down ballot candidates, which through our primary process are the best political athletes to win as much popular support as possible. It's what we do, right? We put the best players on the court, the best Democrats, the best political athletes on the court. The Republicans control the referees. That is the difference. Doesn't matter how good your players are. It doesn't matter how many three-pointers they shoot or how many touchdowns they make. These Republican conservative judges wearing the referee uniform, because that's essentially what the job of the judiciary is, to use a weird analogy. They referee things. Democrats have an idea, Republicans have an idea. It becomes the law. The referees say, nope, penalty, unconstitutional. The Republicans control the refs. And if you control the referees, those that determine the constitutionality or look at laws in a very strict interpretation of the US Constitution, this is what you get. This is why the gerrymandering that we literally fought for 10 years, because we're now at another census, which as I understand it, y'all still are not filling your census out. People, census workers are starting to come to people's doors now. You have had how many months to fill out your census? Please fill out your census. Why I gotta say please? Because if they can change and morph our legislative representation, if they can change the size of our districts, because we Democrats are now filling out the census, Republicans and conservatives are filling out every bit of the census. They understand how important the census is. Why do you think that prisons and jails are built in small towns? Because those small towns that don't have a lot of population, because nobody wants to live in small towns because they suck. People move to big cities because there's big city stuff. Those small towns are losing population. When you lose population, you lose federal funding for hospitals, for roads and bridges, and for schools. And so you build a prison in the small town. So when the census rolls around, you get to count the inmates as a part of your overall town's population, which is totally false because those inmates don't live in those towns. They live in the jail. They're from somewhere else. Their family is somewhere else. And so real obvious things that we can do that we don't pay any attention to. And so we got real mad at the gerrymandering of the districts back in the last census, which was 2010. Then the Republicans who had control of the Wisconsin state legislature redrew the maps in 2011, and they were just outrageously gerrymandered. They're twisted, they're contorted, because they know that if people, more conservative folks have moved further away from the city, then they will take a Republican district and extend it to encapsulate the white flight of people who have more of a conservative viewpoint out further west and farther north, which means that there is no Democrat that can ever get enough votes in these gerrymandered districts to ever beat that Republican, meaning the Republicans can do whatever they want in the legislature, including passing a package of bills that limits the Democratic government. They can do whatever they want because a Democrat cannot come in and beat them. And so we were very upset about that. So immediately the lawsuits started. We got to redraw the maps. These maps are terrible. This is not one vote. Well, they had some slogan for one vote, one person. I don't know what it was, but it was just totally twisted how they did it. So the lawsuit started, then Eric Holder came, and he's got a whole redistricting organization that he raises money for to try and bring more attention and more awareness to redistricting. And we're still not filling out the damn census. And here we are, a whole nother census later. And guess what? The Republicans, just like they planned, still have the majority in the Wisconsin State Assembly. But now, I'd say even more now than in 2010. Because in 2010, the Republican mindset was just very anti-Obama. Now the Republicans are even more entrenched and more under threat because of their support for Donald Trump. So when the Republicans redraw these maps, because they still have the control, at least in Wisconsin, in the Wisconsin State Senate and the Wisconsin State Assembly, unless we can find the majority between now in January of next year, which I don't know if that's going to happen. There's some possibility in the state Senate, but in the Assembly, like, we're 30 plus seats short. They're going to gerrymander these maps even further. It's going to be even worse than it was in 2010, because now any reasonable Democrat can probably go into these current gerrymandered districts and maybe in 2022 could beat some of these Republicans, because I think a lot of folks are just fed up, and plus the coronavirus response and not wanting to work with the governor, et cetera, et cetera. The Republicans are going to gerrymander these districts even further because they have to, otherwise they're going to lose all representation everywhere across the state. And we sat here and we let it happen. D. Robinson, people will say, I don't want to give them that much info, but then post their entire lives on social media. They already, all the stuff they're asking you, they already know. They're just verifying it so they can get an accurate count. You're not hiding from anybody. Do you have a social security number? They know who you are. Do you have a bank account? They know who you are. Do you have a job? Did you fill out forms that when you got hired, these HR forms? They know who you are. Do you have a lease? Do you have a mortgage? Did you register a vehicle? Do you have a phone number? Do you have a social media account? If you answered yes to any of those, there's no hiding. Do you have GPS on your phone? Do you have GPS in your car? Talk about, I don't want nobody to know where I'm at. GPS, 2319 West 38th Street. There's yard signs in front of St. Joseph's Hospital urging people to fill out the census. And hospitals don't usually get political. They shouldn't. St. Joseph's has got, because they're on a couple of main thoroughfares, Burleigh Street and then 51st Street in Milwaukee. St. Joseph's Hospital is a 4 or 5 block campus, and 3 blocks. And they have signs in the grass on the side of the hospital. Please fill out your census, or census 2020, whatever it says, but there's a bunch of them in a row, a bunch of yard signs. St. Joseph's Hospital threatened to close last year, a year and a half ago, because they were not receiving enough private pay hospital utilizers. Like, what do you call a hospital person? Private pay patients, right? Because the level of poverty in the neighborhood is very, very high. So a lot of people are getting a Medicare and Medicaid, which does not reimburse doctors and hospitals at the same rate as private pay. And so they said, we can't be sustainable, we need to close. And so the community got very angry, got very upset. And there were a bunch of community meetings and a bunch of elected officials and stakeholders came together and said, no, St. Joseph's, you can't do that because we already have major health disparities in this community. And if you close this hospital, then it's not that there aren't other hospitals, but some life or death situations where someone who lives in the vicinity of St. Joseph's Hospital has a heart attack or has a stroke, and then they have to go to St. Luke's or they have to go to St. Mary's, they're not going to make it. So having a hospital in the community is very important. So St. Joseph's was like, okay, we'll pay our CEO $7 million less this year just to stay open. Fair enough. We came to an agreement. The hospital was, it continued to operate. But now here comes the census, and federal funding goes toward the healthcare needs of a community based on its population. So the same people that were organizing and gathering community meetings to force St. Joseph's Hospital to stay open need to now take that same energy and encourage people to fill out the census. Because if we are not filling out the census, especially in the St. Joseph's neighborhood, then they can't justify asking for or receiving federal dollars, and the hospital will close. It will close. We got it to stay open for a little while longer with some community enthusiasm and community activism. But if we're not filling out this, and it doesn't even cost anything to fill out the census, it's free. I did mine online. Got something in the mail like in April, and it was a letter, and it had a code. Hi, Sherwin. Probably said Sherman. Hi, Sherman. Hi. Go to census.gov, enter this code, and do your thing. I was like, okay. Enter the code, census.gov, enter the code. To the best of my knowledge, most of my information was populated, my name, my address, all of that stuff, a couple of questions, and then that was it, I was done. And that also saves a census worker from coming to your house. Because they don't want to come to your house. They really don't want to, but it's that important. And we've got people that are willing to risk life and limb in a pandemic so you can get counted, so our neighborhoods and communities can get the funding that I assure you we're going to complain that we're not getting in 6 months. We're going to want more resources for mental health. We're going to want more resources for medical health. We're going to want more resources for community health centers. We're going to want more resources for schools. You guys see what MPS did in April. I don't even know why we don't talk about this more. We know that our schools are underfunded because the way they gather and garner resources is wholly unfair. And quite honestly, if you ask me, it's unconstitutional. Just using property tax dollars to fund your schools is a recipe for disaster. So the Milwaukee public school system, which still has the lion's share of children attending those schools, said we need some money. And the public is usually amenable to that request from the school system. MPS said we need a bunch of money. We need to have a tax increase. We need to increase property taxes because if we're going to be funding schools with property taxes, then we need a referendum to be able to raise the property taxes. Because something that Scott Walker did, he took taxing authority away from local units of government. Because back in the day, if MPS decided they wanted to expand or they wanted new programs or they wanted to hire more teachers or whatever they wanted to do, the MPS school board would just raise the taxes. They're a legislative body that we elect, and they have taxing authority. Scott Walker took all of that away. So now if you want to raise taxes, you have to ask the taxpayers via a referendum or referenda. And so they made a plea. They said, oh, we need money. We're the MPS school system. If we don't have money, then your kids are going to be dumb or whatever they say. And people are like, okay. But what I was trying to point out was because this is a majority minority city, the $100 per $100,000 of property tax increases that was proposed so MPS could get more money to stop the kids from being dumb. But now the kids this is where I feel bad because now the parents are like homeschooling their kids. So I'm not trying to say that some of my friends are not qualified to homeschool their children. What I'm saying is that some of my friends are not qualified to homeschooling their children. However, I digress. So MPS said, okay, we need some money. And because the city of Milwaukee is majority minority, the property tax increase was going to fall disproportionately on working families, middle-class families, and poor families that may own a home in the city that are paying property taxes. And in some cases, the property taxes are so unaffordable that the city is foreclosing on houses because people can't afford to pay their property taxes. In fact, the city of Milwaukee, last time I checked, owned more property because of tax foreclosure than the banks did at the height of the foreclosure crisis. So when you raise property taxes, even though it is going toward the school system, somebody's going to lose their house. You got to be mindful of that. And so I tried to raise that issue. People told me to screw off, but they didn't say screw off. Sure, when the school system needs money. All right, cool. We have our April election, which was an unmitigated disaster, and we make national news again in Wisconsin for that, for our April election, which was a mess. And then the NPS referendum appeared on the ballot. Well, it passed. People said, yes, it's okay if you increase our property taxes $100 per $100,000 of assessed value because we need money for the schools so the kids are not dumb. And what did NPS do with the money? What did they do with the referendum money? What was the first thing they did with the referendum money? Gave teachers salaries and gave bonuses, increased the salaries of people that aren't even in the classroom, administrators and principals. I nearly got sick. There are going to be people in this city who are going to lose their homes, not just because of the pandemic, not just because they're out of work, but because their property taxes are going to go up and the money went to pay the salaries of people that don't even teach the kids. The administrators and the principals and teachers got more salaries and got more benefits. That doesn't directly translate to resources in the classroom, so we got duped. Francine Hale says, fill out the census, people. I did. Denise Jones gives us a couple of emojis. Judy Brown, good morning, Sherwin. You've since purchased an electric. I read that already. Why can't I see more comments? I'm so mad at this, guys. Do I got other stuff to talk about? Yeah, I do. Talk to him. Is Biden? Oh, Biden's money. Oh, Biden's money. Do you guys give money to Joe Biden? Has anybody contributed to Joe Biden? Do you do that? You should. This one is from Politico.com. Joe Biden and the Democratic National Committee reported raising a record $365 million in August, surprising even seasoned party fundraisers and putting to rest fears that Donald Trump would drown him in campaign spending. The staggering cash haul coincides with Biden naming Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate before the convention. It more than doubles Trump's $165 million record set in July, and also eclipses the $193 million raised by Barack Obama in September of 2008. Trump has not yet announced his numbers, and whenever he does announce his numbers for August, they are not going to compare to that. That is a staggering amount of money. That means that people are real serious about making sure the Biden campaign is financially competitive with Trump. And I think it is starting to pay off, because sometimes I go to the YouTube. YouTube has everything. Anything you can think of, somebody made a YouTube video about it. So sometimes I go to YouTube and look at stuff. There's a lot of music on YouTube. I like the YouTube, okay? Don't blame me. I like YouTube. I swear, before every video I play, and a lot of it is how to use Zoom at your house, a Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ad or a negative Trump ad plays, not just before every single YouTube video I watch. They do this thing called mid-roll. You know what mid-roll is? Mid-roll is when you're watching your video, 10 minutes into your little video, 15 minutes into your little stupid video about stupid stuff because it's YouTube and there's stupid stuff on YouTube, but we watch it anyway. They just come in with a commercial and you can't do anything. You can't stop it. You can't fast forward it. Mid-roll. Now, what you can do when you advertise digitally is you can target people based upon their zip code and based upon demographics. And so if they really want to encourage African Americans to vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and they want to make sure that we're getting all of the details of what they stand for with their campaign, they can target people like myself in the neighborhood I live in the zip code I live in the census tract that I live in, with my particular voting history, so that every time I turn on YouTube or watch a video, I see one of those Joe Biden and Kamala Harris ads. And I wish they would stop, because I knew who I was voting for in April of 2019. I was supporting Joe Biden before Joe Biden was actually in the race for a number of reasons, because I wanted Barack Obama's sensibilities back in the White House. There was that. And also, Joe Biden was beating every other Democrat by double digits. He wasn't even in the race, and the head-to-head polling against Joe Biden, even before Joe Biden officially launched his campaign, he was beating Donald Trump. Now, this leads us to another conversation that I'm sure we should have, because my whole point is that we all have the same information, so we're not arguing over facts. Joe Biden lost the first. Did he win any of the first contests? What's the first contest? He got Iowa. Iowa needs to stop holding their caucuses because it's useless at this point, and it was just an unmitigated disaster. Like, we still don't even know how many votes were cast and counted in the Iowa caucuses, but whatever. Iowa, then you have you have New Hampshire. Then at some point you have Nevada, and there was another state that went first. The problem is the first 4 states in the Democratic presidential primary process, the ones that go first, are white, population white, Democratic voters overwhelmingly white, not reflective of the sentiments and the cultural ideas of Black people who are the backbone of the party. So you give your white candidates that don't know anything about the Black community other than what they read this advantage, because when the white voters in the Democratic primary process vote first, it gives a false sense of security to candidates who do not have a credible African-American agenda. But then what happened? The southern states had their Democratic primaries, and of course, the southern states sitting in the back of the bus still, and this is amongst Democrats. They should know better than this. That is why in 2024, all of this stuff has to change. We are putting ourselves as Democrats at unnecessary disadvantages because there will be another Trump at some point in American history. The saculum says every 80 years, you're going to get a Trump and you're going to get a Hitler. Trump is right on time. If you look at the Bell-Howe theory, is that what it's called? Every 80 years, you're going to get a dictator. So then when the southern states voted, where the majority of the Democratic voters in the South get to cast their ballots, after the white people, what happened? Joe Biden was essentially assured the nomination. So does it make any sense to give your Elizabeth Warrens and your Bernie Sanders? Who else was battling in the top? I don't think it was any African-American presidential candidate at the time. It was Bernie and it was Elizabeth Warren. I can't think of who the third person was, but people were saying, well, one of these are going to be the nominee, discounting the African-American firewall and our support for Barack Obama's sensibilities on moderate Democratic politics. Very, very simple. Biden's campaign made sure to release the numbers just before he held a press conference about school safety and the coronavirus on Wednesday, when he took the relatively rare step of answering questions from reporters. Asked what he was going to do with the money, Biden was quick with a joke. Quote, "You want to go to dinner?" Biden asked. Biden, don't say that. Don't say that, Joe. Don't ask people. It's not funny. Quote, "Look," he always starts his sentences with look. "Look, what I'm having to spend a lot of it on is to counter the lies that are being told by Trump's campaign and Swift voters out there," Biden said, referring to a new Republican super PAC. "What I'm trying to do is spend most of that." And by the way, I think the average contribution was like $40. We have over 1.6 million people who contributed in the middle of this economic crisis, somewhere between $5, $10, and $15. I'd say that shows some genuine enthusiasm about making sure we have a chance of becoming president of the United States. There are more people that, Karen Ann, good question, why all the primaries can't be on the same day. Because elections are regulated by states. The only federal involvement in elections is making sure there are no barriers to voting, but every state can have their election whenever they want. So it's not a very uniform process. But we have Super Tuesday states where big old chunk of states all vote at the same time, but that's more coincidence than probably anything else. What was I gonna say? Why did I read a comment, get all distracted? See, this is what happens to me in my old age. It was gonna be a really good point too. I don't know, I'll read some comments. Might as well. Maybe it'll come back to me. MV Skokie Sabali, good morning. Did you talk about the health commissioner leaving? Ooh, I didn't. Former Milwaukee Health Commissioner is that one I kind of don't want to get into because I've got mixed feelings about Jeanette Kowalik. Not her as a person, but she didn't, and I don't know what the reasons are. She took another job and she's aptly qualified to be something else related to public health. She's got a lot of credentials behind her. And I don't know if she got the support from the community that she deserved. And I could go down a whole long road about that, but there were a number of people that didn't like how the health commission itself was being executed, right, under the leadership of Mayor Tom Barrett, because something we haven't talked about in a very long time, because I guess we've just gotten used to it with all the other disparities that exist in this city, is we have a crisis with our lead water pipe infrastructure and the pipes that are bringing water into our homes and older homes in the city of Milwaukee, some 70 plus thousand homes, maybe 100,000 homes, it's lead. And so they add an additive to the water, this phosphorus coating, which is supposed to coat the lead pipe so the lead doesn't actually get into our drinking water. But we know that anything that disturbs the street, everything from street construction to a snow plow slamming down on our streets, can break some of that phosphorus coating off of the lead pipes, and then lead gets into the water. It was a whole big thing, and it's still a problem. And when Bevan Baker, who was the loved health commissioner, loved by community, when he was fired or he resigned or something happened, there was this cloud of suspicion over what is happening with the city of Milwaukee Health Department. Then there was a number of federal dollars that came in, Congresswoman Gwen Moore partially responsible for that, to mitigate the lead crisis that exists in Milwaukee, because it's not just the water, there's lead in the soil, there's lead in the paint, because we were an old industrial Rust Belt city with old housing stock. So we got some federal dollars, and there was supposed to be a certain amount of lead mitigation done, like 3 months, we're supposed to have this many houses cleared, and then 6 months, and then a year, and we were not meeting those numbers. So then the question arises of where is the money going, right? So Bevan Baker leaves, Jeanette Kowalik comes in, and I think some of the leadership in the African-American community that was supportive of Jeanette Kowalik, and she was, I don't want to say she was handpicked by the mayor, she had the credentials to be the health commissioner, but she had the good graces of Mayor Tom Barrett, who was embroiled in scandal at the time, because that's all we were focused on for a good period of time was the lead in the water. And then they would encourage their children to get lead blood tests. Like, we were encouraging people to get a coronavirus test. People were getting their kids tested. And yep, sure as we suspected, in areas where there was street construction or the street or the pavement was disturbed, the children that lived in that area had higher levels of lead in their blood, which can lead to lead poisoning and a whole host of health effects, including juvenile delinquency. That's in lower IQ. That is linked to with children having lead in their blood. And then if you look at some of the crime that is taking place in the city of Milwaukee, could it be because our children are poisoned? I say all that to say this. When Jeanette Kowalik was named as the new health commissioner, she went on a celebratory tour, like a welcome tour of the city of Milwaukee, because whenever we have a new African-American leader in this city, we want to, because the Black community in Milwaukee is a family, incredibly dysfunctional. Oh my God, we get by, but we don't always agree. And so some of the people that were promoting and supporting Jeanette Kowalik, because this is a city that it'll chew you up and spit you out. And it's done that to a lot of people. And we know that this city can do that to people, including in our community, because we have such a high standard for someone's performance. The standard that we have for our leaders is a standard that none of us individually could ever achieve. So we want our leaders to be better than us, which is stupid because they're not. And so the people that were in support of Jeanette Kowalik, because I met her during the Mahlon Mitchell campaign. In fact, my good friend, Alderwoman Shantia Lewis, was taking Jeanette around to introduce her to people. And that's when I met her. Nice enough lady, whatever. But then there's another cohort of African Americans that anything the mayor touches, anything Mayor Tom Barrett has his seal of approval on, they automatically hate it. And I guess I understand it. I mean, it's not very productive, but it is what it is. And because Jeanette Kowalik, even though she's an African American woman, the first, well, other than Pat McManus, I can't forget about Pat McManus. Pat McManus tried to expose some of the racism and some of the corruption in the health department because we wanted to get to the bottom of who was behind the lead crisis and why wasn't the lead water situation and the lead soil and the lead paint getting mitigated. And so they threw Pat McManus out. And then they get Jeanette Kowalik, who did not ruffle those feathers, who did not make the Barrett administration look bad. I get it. It's politics. Bad for public health, but good for politics. Where has that happened before? Something that's been bad for public health, but good for politics. So Jeanette never got universal support from the Black community and other leaders and other stakeholders because of the dark cloud in which she arrived. Now, if that has anything to do with why she's leaving, I don't know. There were a bunch of articles that were published in local publications yesterday. I did not read them because I know too much backstory, and journalism in this city is terrible. Journalism, when it relates to truth and facts of things happening in the Black community, cannot be trusted. This is where you get the truth in Black journalism in this town. And I'll stand up against anybody and I'll go toe to toe with anybody that wants to challenge me on that. But you can't look to the Journal Sentinel and think you're going to get an accurate depiction of what is happening in Black communities. Justin Thomas Brown, good morning. Justin, if there are local census teams, please share links or names of groups volunteering. I know Souls to the Polls, but not sure if they're doing census too. Let's bring someone on to share local detail and ways folks can assist. Because the census is controlled by the Department of the Treasury? Is that Steve Mnuchin? Is he still there, or did Trump fire him with a tweet today? The census, just like the post office and just like, oh, I got a story here. I was over here thinking I didn't have stuff to talk about. Trump is telling people in North Carolina to vote twice. Probably should get to that in a second. But the Trump administration is controlling, I mean, he's the executive. And the census, which is a function of not the IRS, I think it's the Department of the Treasury, because it relates to money. The more population you have, the more congressional representation you get, the more money you get from the federal government for education, for infrastructure, for healthcare. So it's extremely political, meaning it's very simple. If a number, let's give me a fictional city. Wakanda? No, let's say Wakanda. Atlantis. Let's say the people in the city of Atlantis, 1 million people in the city of Atlantis, and it's census time. And there's a bunch of people in the city of Atlantis that don't like the government. They don't want to fill out the census. The government knows too much. Why are you asking me all these questions? And 700,000 people in the city of Atlantis say, screw you, census. I'm not taking the census. And then census workers are dispatched to the city of Atlantis because members of Congress who represent Atlantis need the census forms to be filled out, because those members of Congress could lose their seat if it shows that Atlantis has lost population. Let's say Atlantis is a blue city where all the crime is, one of those blue cities, one of those Democrat-run cities. And people in the Democrat-run city of Atlantis say, screw you, census, I'm not filling you out because government knows too much. Then the census workers come out, knock on doors in the city of Atlantis, and then the people that live, in Atlantis, I'm not answering the door, screw you, I'm not home, nobody lives here, my census count is 0. Then when you finally get the census numbers, it appears that the 1 million people that live in Atlantis, including people who aren't citizens, Even if you're not a citizen of this country, you still get counted in the census because you still need resources to survive. And let's say Atlanta it's a sanctuary city where all the illegals go, and they don't want to fill out the census either. And so 1 million people that live in Atlantis are only going to be counted as 300,000, which means that Atlantis is going to give federal resources for only 300,000 people instead of 1 million, putting an undue burden on the people that live there that didn't fill out the census for their taxes to be raised to pay for the gap in funding and financing because they didn't want to fill out the census. It gets better. If you can show that you have lost a certain amount of population, you're going to lose a congressional seat. A congressional representative is allocated for every 500,000 people that you have in terms of population. But our congressional representation can't go above 535. That's going to need to change too. And all of you that want to change the Electoral College, we're going to have to get more members of Congress and Senate as well, because it makes no sense how California with 40 million people has 2 senators, and so does North Dakota. I think both Dakotas are maybe 3 million people, and they have 4 senators, and California, which has 40 million people, only has 2. So what the Trump administration can do if they're smart is they can say, oh, the Democrat city of Atlantis lost 700,000 people. We're going to, with the Republican-controlled legislatures, we're going to redraw the maps. We're going to take away a congressional district, and we're going to add a congressional district to a place where people did fill out the census in a red town in Texas. And you're going to take a red state and give it another representative in college, therefore making its electoral college count go up while taking a congressional representative and taking electoral college counts down from the city of Atlantis where the Democrats live. If I was them, that's what I would do, and that's what they're going to do. You can shift congressional representation to the places where people fill out the census in the highest number. I would argue that people who are not citizens but have been here in this country making America great need congressional representation just as much as anybody else. But if they are afraid to fill out the census, that's that whole, remember the raids, and I don't know if they're still doing it, where they would just raid people that were illegal. It was to invoke a sense of fear. And we all knew that the Trump administration would never have the manpower and or the resources to send 11 million illegals. They're not illegals because people can't be illegal, to send everybody back. But what they wanted to do is instill a sense of fear so that a lot of those families who came here for a better life, just like a bunch of white people from Europe came here for a better life, so they would just be afraid. And if you're afraid, and if you think that someone is going to knock on your door and pull your kids out of school and deport you to wherever you're from, you're just not going to fill out the census, right? So there you have it. Thanks, guys. I'm experimenting with new theme music. So I used to play Politics as Usual by Jay-Z as my opening theme and my closing theme. But I come to find out that Jay-Z does not like when you use his music. He just, who knew? So I don't know. We'll probably settle on some different theme music at some point in time. But for right now, I guess we'll settle on this. Thank you, guys. I appreciate each and every last one of you for listening to me ramble about God knows what. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to do this. You guys have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
The story of Black America is the story of America. It's the story of a people who have pushed this country to live up to its stated ideals. But Black people have always believed in the promise of a better America. So, at this moment we're in now, we must choose to fight for that better America. And just like our ancestors who stood up to the violent racists of a generation ago, we will stand up to this president and say, no more. Because America is better than him. So we choose to be bigger. We choose to be bolder. We choose to bring back justice, respect, and dignity to this country. We choose Joe Biden to lead us all towards that American promise together.
Join Milwaukee Film virtually for the Minority Health Film Festival, presented by the Froedtert and the Medical College of Wisconsin Health Network, taking place September 10th through 24th. Watch 50 films plus conversations about the health and well-being of families, communities, and institutions. Festival passes are on sale now at mkefilm.org/MHFF.